It was a bright spring morning when Ashley Thompson adjusted her backpack and walked through the bustling halls of Lincoln High School. The sunlight streamed through the large windows, casting warm patches on the freshly polished floors. As a straight-A student and member of the debate team, Ashley was used to navigating these corridors with confidence. Today was particularly special. She had just finished preparing her presentation for the upcoming science fair, a project she'd spent months perfecting. Her chemistry teacher had given her permission to use the lab during lunch break to make final adjustments to her experiment on renewable energy sources. As she walked past groups of students chatting by their lockers, Ashley noticed Officer Richard Miller, the school's new resource officer, watching her intently. She'd heard whispers about him from other students, particularly how he seemed to single out certain kids for questioning. But Ashley, focused on her project, clutched her whole pass and continued walking. The morning announcements echoed through the speakers as students hurried to their classes. Some kids rushed past, their laughter filling the air, while others walked leisurely, enjoying the few minutes between periods. Officer Miller had let several students pass without question, barely glancing in their direction. But when Ashley approached the science wing, Officer Miller stepped directly into her path. His stance was intimidating, feet planted firmly apart, thumbs hooked into his belt loops. "Stop right there," he commanded, his voice carrying across the now quieting hallway. A few students slowed their pace, watching the scene unfold. "Let me see your whole pass," he demanded, even though the bright yellow slip was clearly visible in her hand. Ashley's heart began to race, but she remained composed, remembering her parents' advice about staying calm in difficult situations. She held out the pass, signed clearly by her chemistry teacher, Mrs. Chen. Officer Miller snatched the paper from her hand, examining it with exaggerated suspicion. More students had stopped now, forming a small crowd. Ashley could feel their eyes on her, some sympathetic, others merely curious. She stood straight, trying to maintain her dignity despite the growing embarrassment. "This doesn't look right to me," Officer Miller declared, holding the pass up to the light as if checking for a watermark. The absurdity of the situation might have been almost funny if it weren't so humiliating. The same passes were used by every teacher in the school, their distinctive yellow color impossible to replicate with regular paper. Ashley's voice remained steady as she explained, "Mrs. Chen signed it just 5 minutes ago. I'm heading to the lab to work on my science fair project." She could see other students walking past, their own passes barely getting a glance from the officer. The disparity in treatment was impossible to ignore. The hallway had grown unusually quiet, the normal between-class chatter dying down as more students paused to watch. Someone whispered, "That's not right," while others pulled out their phones, the subtle movement of their hands suggesting they were recording the interaction. What Officer Miller didn't notice was Miss Torres, the new technology teacher, standing in her doorway. She had been setting up her classroom for the next period when the commotion caught her attention. Quietly, she took out her phone and began documenting the incident, her expression growing more concerned with each passing moment. Ashley's hands trembled slightly, but her voice remained clear and respectful. "Officer Miller, I have permission to be here. You can call Mrs. Chen to verify if you'd like." She was thinking about her science project, about all the work she'd put into it, about the precious minutes of her lunch period ticking away. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and somewhere down the hall, a locker slammed shut. The sound seemed to echo in the tense atmosphere. Other students continued to pass by, their passes identical to Ashley's, yet Officer Miller remained focused solely on her, his behavior becoming increasingly questionable with each passing moment. Little did Officer Miller know that his actions that morning would set off a chain of events that would not only change his life, but would also transform the entire school system's approach to security and student rights. The security cameras silently recorded everything, and in the coming days, these recordings would tell a story that couldn't be ignored or explained away. As Ashley stood there, maintaining her composure despite the unfair treatment, she had no way of knowing that this moment would become a catalyst for change. She was simply a student trying to get to the lab, unaware that sometimes the biggest movements for justice start with the smallest moments of injustice. The tension in the hallway reached its peak as Officer Miller's voice grew louder, drawing even more attention. "Empty your backpack," he ordered Ashley, pointing to the floor. The command echoed through the now silent corridor, causing several students to stop and stare in disbelief. Ashley's heart pounded against her chest as she looked at the spotless hallway floor. Her science project materials were carefully organized in her backpack, including fragile glass beakers she'd borrowed from the lab. "Sir," she said calmly, though her voice shook slightly, "my science equipment is delicate. Could we do this on a table instead?" I said, "Empty it, now." Officer Miller's tone left no room for discussion. Other students continued walking past, their own backpacks unchecked, their movements unrestricted. The disparity was impossible to ignore. With trembling hands, Ashley carefully knelt down and began removing items from her backpack. First came her textbooks, then her carefully organized notebook with months of research notes. The small crowd of onlookers had grown, their whispers filling the air like static electricity. Miss Torres, still recording from her classroom doorway, stepped slightly closer. She wasn't the only one documenting the scene. Dozens of phones were now raised, their camera lenses capturing every moment of the unfolding situation. "Faster," Officer Miller barked, causing Ashley to flinch. She continued removing items, trying to protect her science equipment. Her solar panel prototype, wrapped carefully in bubble wrap, made a soft crinkling sound as she placed it on the floor. "What's that?" Officer Miller demanded, pointing at the wrapped package. "Unwrap it. Now." "It's my science project, sir, for the state competition next week." Ashley's voice remained steady, even as her hands shook while unwrapping the delicate equipment. The sunlight from the windows caught the solar panels, creating small rainbow reflections on the walls. Officer Miller picked up her project, turning it roughly in his hands. "This could be hiding something," he declared, examining it with exaggerated suspicion. "How do I know this isn't some kind of contraband?" A collective gasp rose from the watching students. Everyone in school knew about Ashley's project. She'd won the school science fair with it last month, and pictures of her with her invention had been featured in the local newspaper. Officer Miller, a brave student, called out from the crowd, "That's her award-winning project." It was in the paper. But the officer silenced them with a sharp glare. The humiliation continued as Officer Miller picked through every item, making snide comments about each one. He'd flipped through her notebooks, letting papers scatter across the floor. Her pencil case was emptied, pens rolling in every direction. A small group of students quietly knelt down to help gather the runaway items, their faces showing a mix of anger and sympathy. As Ashley tried to keep her composure, Officer Miller picked up her wallet. "Let's see what we have here," he said, opening it without permission. Ashley's shoulders tensed as he pulled out her student ID, honor roll certificate, and the photo of her family she kept for good luck. "Honor roll?" he scoffed, looking at her certificate. "We'll see about that." His tone dripped with skepticism, as if academic achievement was somehow suspicious. The bell rang, signaling the start of the next period, but nobody moved. The crowd had grown larger, with students from nearby classrooms peeking out to see what was happening. The atmosphere was thick with tension and disbelief. As the confrontation unfolded in the hallway, Miss Torres stood quietly in her classroom doorway, her steady hand holding her phone at waist level. She'd been teaching at Lincoln High for just 3 months, but she knew this moment would change everything. The new security cameras, installed last week, blinked silently overhead, their red lights a quiet witness to the scene. Through her phone's screen, she watched as Ashley tried to salvage her damaged science project. The solar panel's cracked surface caught the fluorescent lights, a spider web of fractures marking where it had hit the floor. Years of teaching had taught Miss Torres when to step in and when to document, and right now, documentation was crucial. Other teachers had gathered too, each watching with growing concern. Mr. Chen, the chemistry teacher who'd signed Ashley's hall pass, arrived just in time to see Officer Miller roughly handling the students' belongings. His face darkened with worry as he observed the situation, carefully pulling out his own phone to record. The security cameras captured everything from multiple angles. The main hallway camera showed Officer Miller's aggressive stance, the way he loomed over Ashley while other students passed freely. The side camera caught the faces of watching students, their expressions a mix of shock, anger, and helplessness. A third camera near the drinking fountain recorded the entire incident in perfect detail, including the officer's dismissive treatment of the whole pass he knew was legitimate. What Officer Miller didn't realize was that his actions were being documented in more ways than he could imagine. The school's new security system wasn't just recording video, it captured crystal clear audio too. Every dismissive comment, every harsh command, every biased remark was preserved in digital memory. The student witnesses, though silent, weren't inactive. Social media messages flew between phones, alerting parents and community members about what was happening. Some students live-streamed the incident, their quiet commentary providing context to viewers outside the school walls. Ms. Torres watched as one student carefully helped Ashley gather her scattered papers, while another picked up the pieces of her broken project. The solidarity among the students was powerful. Without words, they showed their support through actions. Even those who didn't know Ashley personally understood the gravity of what they were witnessing. In her classroom next door, Mrs. Patterson, the school counselor, was already on the phone with the principal. Her voice was low but urgent as she described the scene unfolding in the hallway. The principal, away at a district meeting, listened intently, his years of experience telling him this situation needed immediate attention. The security office downstairs buzzed with activity as the security monitors showed multiple views of the incident. The head of security, Mr. Thompson, watched with growing concern, knowing this footage would be crucial in the coming days. He began the process of backing up all camera feeds, ensuring nothing would be lost. Back in the hallway, Officer Miller remained oblivious to the digital eyes capturing his every move. He continued his inspection, unaware that each passing minute added to the mountain of evidence building against him. The security cameras caught everything: how he treated Ashley differently from other students, how he deliberately damaged her property, how he abused his authority. Ms. Torres glanced at her phone's storage space, making sure she had enough memory to keep recording. She knew from her previous job as a civil rights advocate that documentation like this could make all the difference. The steady stream of video she was capturing would soon become part of something much bigger than a single incident in a school hallway. The school's IT department was automatically archiving all security footage, creating timestamps and multiple backups. The new system, installed as part of a district-wide safety upgrade, was doing exactly what it was designed to do, providing clear, undeniable evidence of what happened in school corridors. Students continued to record from different angles, their young hands steady as they captured the unfolding scene. Some had already sent clips to their parents, while others saved their videos, knowing they might be needed later. The collective documentation was building a comprehensive record that would be impossible to dispute. More teachers arrived, drawn by the commotion and the unusual quiet in the typically noisy hallway. Each one who witnessed the scene seemed to instinctively reach for their phone, adding to the growing collection of evidence. They knew this wasn't just about one student or one incident, it was about a pattern of behavior that needed to be addressed. The school's vice principal, watching remotely through the security system on her tablet, was already drafting an email to the school board. She had seen enough. The multiple camera angles, combined with audio recordings and witness videos, painted a clear picture of what was happening in her school. What made this incident different from any previous complaints about Officer Miller was the sheer volume of evidence being collected. No single video could be dismissed as selective editing or missing context. The multiple perspectives told the complete story, leaving no room for denial or excuses. As Ashley finally gathered the last of her belongings, the bell rang again. Students reluctantly moved toward their classes, but their phones had captured everything. The digital record of this incident was already spreading through the school's networks, becoming part of a larger narrative that would soon demand action. Within an hour of the incident, Ashley's parents rushed through the main entrance of Lincoln High School. Her mother, a respected civil rights attorney, walked with purpose, her heels echoing in the quiet hallway. Her father, who had left an important business meeting mid-presentation, carried himself with controlled anger as they made their way to the principal's office. The school secretary, having already been briefed about the situation, immediately showed them into the conference room where the principal, Mr. Davidson, was waiting. The room's large screen displayed paused footage from the security cameras showing multiple angles of the morning's events. "Before we begin," Ashley's mother said, placing her briefcase on the table, "I want to see everything." Her voice was calm but firm, carrying the weight of 20 years of legal experience. The principal nodded, reaching for the remote control. What unfolded on the screen left everyone in the room silent. The high-definition footage showed the incident from start to finish, crystal clear and undeniable. The audio picked up every word, every dismissive tone, every biased comment Officer Miller had made. "There's more," Mr. Davidson said quietly, switching to Ms. Torres' recording. This closer view showed details the security cameras had missed: the trembling of Ashley's hands as she carefully tried to protect her science project, the tears she fought back as her belongings scattered across the floor. Ashley's father gripped the back of his chair, his knuckles white. "How long has this been going on?" he asked, his voice tight with emotion. The principal sighed heavily, pulling out a folder filled with incident reports. "We've received complaints about Officer Miller before," he admitted, spreading out the documents. "But nothing this blatant, and never with this much evidence." He played another clip, this time from a student's phone, showing how Officer Miller had deliberately ignored white students while targeting others for random checks. The room fell silent again as they watched more footage. The systematic nature of Officer Miller's behavior became clear as they reviewed multiple incidents from the past few weeks. The new security system had captured it all, creating a damning pattern of evidence. "There's something else you should see," the principal said, pulling up email records. "Other parents have been sending in complaints all morning. The videos are already circulating in the community." He turned his laptop around, showing dozens of unread messages in his inbox. Ashley's mother leaned forward, her legal mind already working. "I want copies of everything," she said. "Every video, every complaint, every incident report. This stops today." The principal nodded, already reaching for his phone to call the IT department. As they reviewed more footage, the school's vice principal entered with additional files. "The teachers have been sending in their statements all morning," she said, placing a stack of papers on the table. "Ms. Torres' video has been backed up to our secure server, along with statements from 27 students who witnessed the incident." Ashley's father picked up one of the statements, reading it carefully. "The students stood up for her," he said softly, his voice thick with emotion. "They didn't just watch. They helped her pick up her things, they recorded everything, they spoke up." The principal played one final clip, this one showing the aftermath. Students could be seen helping Ashley gather her scattered belongings, their faces showing a mix of anger and determination. The solidarity was powerful, a silent protest against injustice. Within an hour of the incident, Ashley's parents rushed through the main entrance of Lincoln High School. Her mother, a respected civil rights attorney, walked with purpose, her heels echoing in the quiet hallway. Her father, who had left an important business meeting mid-presentation, carried himself with controlled anger as they made their way to the principal's office. The school secretary, having already been briefed about the situation, immediately showed them into the conference room where the principal, Mr. Davidson, was waiting. The room's large screen displayed paused footage from the security cameras showing multiple angles of the morning's events. "Before we begin," Ashley's mother said, placing her briefcase on the table, "I want to see everything." Her voice was calm but firm, carrying the weight of 20 years of legal experience. The principal nodded, reaching for the remote control. What unfolded on the screen left everyone in the room silent. The high-definition footage showed the incident from start to finish, crystal clear and undeniable. The audio picked up every word, every dismissive tone, every biased comment Officer Miller had made. "There's more," Mr. Davidson said quietly, switching to Ms. Torres' recording. This closer view showed details the security cameras had missed: the trembling of Ashley's hands as she carefully tried to protect her science project, the tears she fought back as her belongings scattered across the floor. Ashley's father gripped the back of his chair, his knuckles white. "How long has this been going on?" he asked, his voice tight with emotion. The principal sighed heavily, pulling out a folder filled with incident reports. "We've received complaints about Officer Miller before," he admitted, spreading out the documents. "But nothing this blatant, and never with this much evidence." He played another clip, this time from a student's phone, showing how Officer Miller had deliberately ignored white students while targeting others for random checks. The room fell silent again as they watched more footage. The systematic nature of Officer Miller's behavior became clear as they reviewed multiple incidents from the past few weeks. The new security system had captured it all, creating a damning pattern of evidence. "There's something else you should see," the principal said, pulling up email records. "Other parents have been sending in complaints all morning. The videos are already circulating in the community." He turned his laptop around, showing dozens of unread messages in his inbox. Ashley's mother leaned forward, her legal mind already working. "I want copies of everything," she said. "Every video, every complaint, every incident report. This stops today." The principal nodded, already reaching for his phone to call the IT department. As they reviewed more footage, the school's vice principal entered with additional files. "The teachers have been sending in their statements all morning," she said, placing a stack of papers on the table. "Ms. Torres's video has been backed up to our secure server, along with statements from 27 students who witnessed the incident." Ashley's father picked up one of the statements, reading it carefully. "The students stood up for her," he said softly, his voice thick with emotion. "They didn't just watch. They helped her pick up her things, they recorded everything, they spoke up." The principal played one final clip, this one showing the aftermath. Students could be seen helping Ashley gather her scattered belongings, their faces showing a mix of anger and determination. The solidarity was powerful, a silent protest against injustice. "We've already contacted the school board," Mr. Davidson said, closing the video files. "They're calling an emergency meeting for this afternoon. Officer Miller has been placed on immediate administrative leave pending investigation." Ashley's mother opened her briefcase, pulling out a legal pad. "That's a start," she said, her pen poised over the paper. "But it's not enough. This isn't just about one incident or one officer. This is about systemic change." The meeting continued as they outlined immediate actions, preserving all evidence, gathering witness statements, meeting with the school board's legal team. Each piece of footage, each written statement, each recorded interaction built a stronger case. What had started as a humiliating morning for one student was transforming into a moment of reckoning for the entire school system. The evidence was undeniable, the witnesses numerous, and the community's response overwhelming. As Ashley's parents left the conference room 2 hours later, they passed the science lab where their daughter was working on repairing her damaged project. Through the window, they could see several students helping her, sharing their tools and materials, showing the kind of solidarity that would help drive real change. The security cameras continued their silent watch, recording this moment too, not of confrontation this time, but of community, of students and teachers coming together to right a wrong. It was just the beginning of what would become a much larger story of justice and transformation. The internal affairs investigation into Officer Miller's conduct moved quickly. In a brightly lit office downtown, Detective Wilson spread dozens of files across her desk, each one revealing a disturbing pattern. The school's security footage played on her computer screen, showing incident after incident of questionable behavior. "Look at this," she said to her partner, pointing to her screen. The footage showed Officer Miller's body camera mysteriously turning off just before confrontations with students. Not once or twice, but dozens of times over the past 6 months. The timing was too perfect to be coincidental. The investigation had started with Ashley's incident, but it quickly grew larger. Students from across the district began coming forward with their own stories. Each account was carefully documented, building a timeline that stretched back to Officer Miller's first day at Lincoln High. "We've got something else," her partner said, walking in with a thick folder. Tech team just finished their sweep of his social media accounts. He laid out printed screenshots across the desk, each one more damning than the last. Officer Miller's private posts revealed years of concerning behavior and biased views. The detective picked up one particularly troubling post from 3 years ago. He was documenting his stops and bragging about them online, she said, her voice tight with controlled anger. He treated it like some kind of game. In another office across town, the school district's technology team worked late into the night, analyzing footage from security cameras. They discovered that Officer Miller had attempted to access the security system's controls multiple times, trying to delete footage of his confrontations with students. He didn't realize the new system backs up everything automatically, the IT director explained to the investigators. Every deleted file, every attempted access, it's all recorded. The evidence was mounting, painting a picture of systematic abuse of power. Back at Lincoln High, more students came forward with their phones, sharing videos they'd kept secret out of fear. One student's parent, a computer forensics expert, helped recover deleted footage from Officer Miller's work computer, revealing more instances of misconduct. The investigation uncovered a pattern. Officer Miller would target certain students, turn off his body camera, conduct aggressive searches, then file reports that didn't match witness accounts. But he had never counted on the students documenting everything on their phones. Detective Wilson sat at her desk late one evening, reviewing the evidence for the 100th time. The school's new security system had been Officer Miller's undoing. Every camera angle, every audio recording, every timestamp proved that his written reports were false. He got sloppy, her partner said, bringing in yet another stack of files. Started believing he was untouchable. The files contained complaints from teachers that had previously been buried, now resurfaces as part of the investigation. The tech team's analysis revealed something else. Officer Miller had been sharing his techniques with other officers in private online forums. His posts bragged about how to avoid detection, how to manipulate body camera footage, how to write reports that couldn't be challenged. But technology had caught up with him. The school's new security system, with its multiple angles and backup servers, had captured everything. The students' phones, always ready to record, had filled in any gaps. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. In the district attorney's office, prosecutors reviewed the case files with growing concern. This wasn't just about one incident or one officer anymore. This was about a systemic failure that had allowed abuse of power to go unchecked for too long. "Look at these timestamps," one prosecutor said, comparing security footage to Officer Miller's reports. He deliberately falsified his records. The disparity between his written accounts and the video evidence was striking. In case after case, his reports didn't match reality. The investigation expanded to include Officer Miller's previous assignments. Other schools started reviewing their security footage, looking for similar patterns. Former students began calling in, sharing their own experiences, adding to the growing mountain of evidence. What Officer Miller never realized was that his downfall had been recorded in high definition from multiple angles, backed up on secure servers, and witnessed by dozens of students who refused to stay silent. His attempts to cover his tracks had only made things worse. As Detective Wilson prepared her final report, she included a note about the role technology had played in exposing the truth. In the end, she wrote, it wasn't just the security cameras or the body cams that brought this to light. It was the students who had the courage to record, to save, to speak up. The investigation was coming to an end, but its implications would reach far beyond one officer or one school. The evidence gathered would lead to changes in how school resource officers were trained, monitored, and held accountable. The courtroom fell silent as the district attorney stood up, ready to present the case against Officer Miller. The room was packed with students, parents, teachers, and community members, all waiting to see justice served. Ashley sat with her parents in the front row, her repaired science project now safely displayed at the state competition. "Your Honor," the district attorney began, "what we have here is not just one incident of misconduct. We have documented evidence of a systematic abuse of power." She gestured to the large screen where security footage began to play. The evidence was presented methodically. First came the school's security cameras showing multiple angles of Ashley's incident. The crystal-clear footage left no room for doubt. Then came the recovered body camera footage, revealing a pattern of selective enforcement and harassment. Officer Miller sat at the defense table, his former confidence now replaced with visible unease. His attorney shifted uncomfortably as more evidence was presented: social media posts, falsified reports, tampered body camera footage. Each piece of evidence tightened the case against him. The defendant didn't just violate school policy, the prosecutor continued. He'd violated the trust of students, parents, and the entire community. She played clips from student interviews, their voices steady as they recounted similar experiences. Teachers took the stand one by one, describing what they had witnessed. Ms. Torres's testimony was particularly powerful as she walked the court through her recording of the incident. "I knew I had to document it," she explained. "This kind of behavior had gone on too long." The school's IT director testified about the attempted deletions of security footage. The system recorded every attempt to access and alter the files, he explained, showing logs of Officer Miller's failed attempts to cover his tracks. Detective Wilson presented her findings next, laying out the timeline of events. "We found a pattern dating back 3 years," she testified. The defendant targeted specific students while letting others pass freely. The data shows clear bias in his actions. Parents in the courtroom listened intently as the tech team explained how they recovered deleted files from Officer Miller's work computer. The evidence showed dozens of incidents where his written reports contradicted video footage. The defense tried to argue that Officer Miller was just doing his job, maintaining school safety. But the prosecution had an answer for every excuse. They showed split-screen comparisons of how he treated different students, the disparity impossible to ignore. "Look at these timestamps," the prosecutor said, pointing to the screen. The defendant's body camera mysteriously turns off at exactly the same time the security footage shows him confronting students. This happened not once, not twice, but 27 times. Officer Miller's own social media posts were particularly damaging. Screenshots showed him bragging about his techniques for targeting certain students. His private messages revealed conversations with other officers, sharing tips on avoiding accountability. The jury watched intently as video after video played, showing the full scope of Officer Miller's actions. The school's new security system had captured everything in perfect detail, creating an undeniable record of his misconduct. As the evidence mounted, even Officer Miller's attorney seemed to lose confidence. The defense table was covered with documents, each one contradicting their claims of proper conduct. The truth was written in timestamps, video frames, and digital logs. Students who had been afraid to speak up before now sat in the courtroom, watching their recorded statements play on the screen. Their courage in coming forward had helped build an airtight case against the officer who had abused his power. When the final piece of evidence was presented, a comprehensive analysis of Officer Miller's pattern of behavior, the courtroom was absolutely silent. The data showed a clear and consistent pattern of discrimination that couldn't be explained away. The district attorney concluded her presentation by playing one last clip, the moment when students helped Ashley gather her scattered belongings. "This case isn't just about punishment," she said. "It's about restoring faith in those who are meant to protect our children." The jury's faces showed their understanding of the gravity of the situation. This wasn't just about one incident in a school hallway. This was about holding power accountable, about standing up for what's right, about making sure such abuse never happened again. The jury's decision was unanimous. After just 4 hours of deliberation, Officer Miller was found guilty on all counts. The judge's voice echoed through the courtroom as he announced the sentence: 3 years in prison, followed by 5 years of probation and a permanent ban from working in law enforcement. But the story didn't end with Officer Miller's sentencing. The case sparked a wave of change that swept through the school district and beyond. On a bright morning 6 months later, Ashley stood at a podium in the school auditorium, addressing a packed room of students, teachers, and community members. "What happened that day wasn't just about me," she said, her voice strong and clear. "It was about every student who ever felt powerless, every person who was treated unfairly because of how they looked." The audience listened intently as she shared her vision for positive change. The school district had undergone a complete transformation. New training programs were implemented for all school resource officers, focusing on bias prevention and proper conduct. Every officer now wore body cameras that couldn't be turned off during interactions with students. Regular community meetings became the norm, where students could voice their concerns directly to school administrators and security personnel. The walls between authority figures and students began to crumble, replaced by understanding and mutual respect. Ashley's parents had worked with the school board to create a student rights committee. "Every student deserves to feel safe at school," her mother explained during one meeting. And now they have a voice in making sure that happens. The security system that had caught Officer Miller's misconduct became a model for other schools. But now it wasn't just about catching bad behavior, it was about protecting everyone's rights and ensuring fair treatment for all students. Teachers reported a positive change in school atmosphere. Students walked the halls with confidence, knowing they had the right to question unfair treatment. The fear that had once lingered in certain corners of the school was replaced with a sense of community. Ashley's science project, once damaged in that hallway confrontation, went on to win first place at the state competition. But more importantly, she had found her voice as an advocate for change. She started a student organization focused on rights and responsibilities. The local news covered the story of transformation, from crisis to change. How one school learned from its mistakes, read the headline. The article featured interviews with students, teachers, and administrators, all speaking about the positive changes they'd witnessed. Other school districts began reaching out, asking for advice on implementing similar reforms. Ashley and her parents traveled to education conferences, sharing their story and helping other communities prevent similar incidents. The new school resource officer, carefully chosen and properly trained, became a positive presence in the halls. Students saw her as someone to trust, not fear. She regularly participated in school events and got to know students as individuals. 1 year after the incident, the school hosted a community celebration. The auditorium was filled with artwork, photographs, and stories documenting the journey from that difficult day to the present. It was a reminder of how crisis could lead to positive change. Ashley stood at her display, explaining her latest project to visitors, a student rights handbook she had helped create. "Knowledge is power," she told a group of younger students. "When we know our rights and responsibilities, we can stand up for what's right." The school's transformation became a case study in how to turn a negative situation into positive change. Educational experts praised the comprehensive approach that addressed not just security issues, but the underlying culture of the school. In the end, the story wasn't just about justice being served. It was about a community coming together, learning from its mistakes, and building something better. The hallways of Lincoln High School now echoed with the sounds of confident students, engaged teachers, and respectful dialogue. As Ashley walked through those same halls where everything had started, she saw something different now. Not just cameras watching for misconduct, but a community watching out for each other. The change hadn't been easy, but it had been worth every step.